good everybody, it's me your uncool shinobi. Welcome to my channel, hope you will like my videos. This video is the story of what if Naruto was raised by the Gamabunta to replace Minato. Hit the subscribe button and share this video with everyone. Let's go. Minato was not having a good day. Sure, it started fine, just like any other. Then Kushina had gone into labor, and October 10th had gone from decent to wonderful. He was a father to a beautiful boy named Naruto. Then some masked man claiming to be Madara Uchiha had not only found out about the Ambu guarded cave where his son was born, but had gotten past the guards, killed Sarutobi's wife, kidnapped his son, taken Kushina when Minato went to save Naruto, released the Nine Tails in the middle of the village, and just when Minato had him, he escaped anyway. If Minato lived through today, a feat getting less and less likely, he would despise October the 10th. However, Minato had to prioritize, and right now the biggest priority was dealing with the Nine Tails. The beast had so many legends spread about it and its fearsome power and lived up to every single one. Killing this kind of beast was beyond even the first Hokage, and was definitely beyond his skills. But while Minato might not have the tailed beast suppressing wood style, he did have something the first didn't, sealing. All he had to do was keep the Nine Tails occupied long enough to finish the job. Minato glanced at the raging tails and gave up any hope of holding the thing down himself. Minato bit his thumb and ran through the hand signs. He jumped above the Nine Tails and slammed his palm down, and in a puff of smoke, the great beast was gone. Not quite gone yet, Minato reminded himself. Using the Flying Thunder God on two targets of such size was straining even for him, and he still had to get Kushina and the container for the Nine Tails. Gamabunta, I need you to hold this thing down while I prepare the seal. No promises, I might finish him off before you get back, said the large chief of the Toads. As it turned out, the new chief still had some growing to do mentally. In the scarce minute that Minato was gone, the Nine Tails had managed to slice his stomach despite the Toad playing a careful defense. Any wounds inflicted by the Toad's blade seemed to disappear within seconds. Gamabunta stuck to firing off water bullets from a distance after almost having his gut spilled over the forest. Minato returned, now with a small child and his dying wife. Minato summoned a sealing altar on top of Gamabunta's head and put the child down on the platform to begin the sealing. On any other day, Gamabunta would have been angry at being treated like a glorified table, but today he realized it was something he had to overlook. Gamabunta wasn't the only one to notice the presence of a sealing altar and a Jinchuriki to be. The Nine Tails roared in anger before sprinting at Gamabunta to try and interrupt the sealing. Minato shouted something as well, and though it was drowned out by the Nine Tails' fury, Gamabunta could guess what it was he had to do. Just as the Nine Tails neared him, the Toad leapt into the air and stabbed the Nine Tails' reaching paw into the ground with his sword. Minato finished whatever he had been doing on top of the Toad's head, and a pressing feeling of death overtook the area. The Nine Tails roared again, not in rage this time, but something more akin to fear or annoyance. Then the beast shrunk. Gamabunta couldn't find any other way to explain it. The Nine Tails went from a healthy-looking, if enormous and nine-tailed, fox to a scrawny, laughable facsimile of the terrifying beast it was. But the Nine Tails was anything but weak, even in its diluted state. Gamabunta's eyes widened as the Nine Tails lunged forward with its claws, threatening to impale what Gamabunta presumed was the new Jinchuriki on top of his head. Gamabunta tried to dodge the attack, but it had come from such a close range he had no real chance of dodging it completely. Still, Gamabunta thought he had evaded it as the claw passed over his eye by several feet. Not much about the two beasts fighting. As it was, the Toad ended up with a wound over his left eye, the Nine Tails' corrosive chakra leaving a massive scar. He had blinked on reflex, the only thing preventing him from losing his eye entirely. The feeling of death came on seemingly twice as strong as before, and the Nine Tails roared in absolute fury at being entirely sealed into a newborn baby.
Gamabunta looked down as he saw Minato Namikaze, the yellow flash, the fourth Hokage of the village hidden in the leaves, fall to the forest floor alongside his wife, Kushina Uzumaki. His summoner dead, Gamabunta returned to Mount Myobokuzan, his last image that of the third Hokage catching their bodies.
Gamabunta returned to the sound of toads all around and a cacophony of questions.
Quiet, yelled Gamabunta, one at a time. The crowd parted to allow two toads through, one green and one purple, both only as big as Gamabunta's eye. These were Fukasaku and Shima, the elder toad sages of Mount Myobokuzan. Of course, the young hotshot of a chief liked to remind them most of the elder part of their title. Little Minato's name is no longer on the wall of summoners. As the last toad summoned, do you know anything we don't? Asked Fukasaku, the little green toad.
Yeah, he died defeating the Nine Tails. I don't know the circumstances around the fight, but if Minato hadn't sealed the thing when he did, I might not be here, said Gamabunta. That's Minato for you. Even when he's facing the Nine Tails, he still manages to win. He was a good summoner, murmured Shima. By the way boy, I can see the scar on your eye and your gut coming from the Nine Tails claws, but what on earth caused that thing on your head? Asked Fukasaku. What? Exclaimed Gamabunta as he reached up on his head in a panic. His hands settled on a lump in the middle of his head that hadn't been there before. As soon as he covered the bump, it began to cry. Oi! Be quiet up there! The toad chief yelled. This of course did nothing but make the lump cry all the louder. Shima jumped up on the chief's head to see what was upon his head, as it was now clearly not a battle wound.
Upon reaching the crying mass, she discovered it to be a child, not even a day old yet, with blonde hair and 3 marks down the sides of his cheeks. Looking at the ceiling altar he was placed upon, Shima shouted down to Gamabunta, "It looks like the new Jinchuriki tagged along for the ride back. We can't get him back to the hidden leaf now that Minato's dead. We could send a message to Jiraiya. Then again I don't want to be trusting him with a baby."
You two are plenty old enough to have raised a lot of tadpoles in your time. What's one more for a short time? Asked Gamabunta mockingly. That might not be the worst idea you've had boy. I guess we can care for the little tadpole for a while. After all, he looks enough like him to be Minato's son. We could use a new summoner. Then again, we might be too old for the job. Why don't you take the crying, pooping, crying, eating, crying little tyke, eh? Said Fukasaku as Shima joined him on the ground, now carrying the baby. Oh no, that's quite, generous, but, you know, I have a young one of my own all the way and, you two would be a much better influence on him. I couldn't deprive you of such joy when I already have my own, stammered Gamabunta as he quietly regretted his choice to mock his elder's age. So boy, does the tyke have a name? Asked Shima. I don't know. A light green toad about the size of a horse with a ridiculous bow and makeup hopped forward and spoke up in an equally ridiculously high voice. I remember Jirihani mentioning how Minato's son was going to be named after the main character of his first book. So his name is probably Naruto. Could I get a closer look at little Naruto? He is so cute I could simply. Thank you for your help Gamariki. I think we should get Naruto here settled if he's to be staying for any length of time, interrupted Fukasaku. Well you don't have to be so rude about it, replied Gamariki as his voice dropped several octaves. With that, the toads all went their separate ways to both mourn Minato's death and rejoice in having found a new perspective summoner so soon. Gamabunta went to lick his wound, figuratively, by soaking in one of Mount Myobukoujan's coiled springs. Fukasaku and Shima carried the now identified Naruto to their house to get a room ready for him and hopefully stop his incessant crying. Fukasaku hoped that Naruto would be an acceptable replacement for Minato as a summoner. Little did he know that Naruto would smash his expectations into 1,000 pieces. Naruto, coming, replied the 4-year-old boy. Naruto had deep blue eyes and shockingly yellow hair. He stood at a little less than 4 feet, but that was still plenty tall enough to tower over the small green toad that had called him over. Naruto, began Fukasaku, these past years Shima and I have raised you as one of our tadpoles. Do you know why? Because it's up to me to be the next Toad Summoner. I know this pa, said Naruto. Aye aye. But do you know what you have to do to become the Toad Summoner? Countered Fukasaku. Well, I guess I'd summon toads, and maybe be summoned by toads, ventured Naruto. Being the Toad Summoner does entail both those things, yes. But you'd also need to train to utilize your chakra. Now before you ask, said Fukasaku, cutting off Naruto's budding question, chakra is an energy used to do a lot of things, like summon toads. It's produced by you, me, Ma, and everything else in the world. Since you hold it in your body, you can only have so much of it at a time, and if you run out, you die. One thing I'll be teaching you is how to use the chakra other things make, so you don't run out as easily. It'll be hard, but if you're not up for it I could always take you to the Hidden Leaf Village. No way pa. If I can be even a bit as cool as old Bunta, I'll work super duper hard, said Naruto excitedly. Alright then. I figured you say that. We'll start with some meditation, said Fukasaku, pulling out a small stick from his cloak. Try not to move. I think I've got it pa, Fukasaku-sensei, said Naruto as excitedly as one can while not moving at all. He winced and reached up to rub the back of his head after the stick came down for referring to his sensei as, pa, this training was going to be a pain. I'm impressed. Getting a grasp on Sage Mode at such a young age is a feat to be sure. Meeting a young un who can stay still at all is rare enough. But sensing and then absorbing natural chakra is near impossible. You shouldn't have the reserves to do anything of the sort, said Fukasaku, bringing his stick back into his cloak. Well, I am quite impressive. The one who does impossible things. I like the sound of that. I dare say I might even be better than you were back in the day. When was that day? 100 years ago, said the 6-year-old, soaking up the praise like a sponge. To take it back. You aren't quite mature or wise enough to be called a sage yet. More like a junior sage, quipped Fukasaku. Hey, I'm plenty wise enough to be a sage. Besides, I've mastered Sage Mode. So there's no way I can't be a sage, said Naruto, confident in his logic. Oh ho ho, mastered, eh? I'd say you have a ways to go before you've mastered Sage Mode. What kind of enemy would let his opponent sit there and charge up energy for 10 minutes? As it is now, your Sage Mode is useless in combat, said Fukasaku. Well, what else can I do, huh? You said it yourself, one must be still when gathering natural chakra, or risk losing control and joining these poor fools who tried and failed, said Naruto, gesturing to the surrounding statues of toads in meditative poses. Those who had failed their Sage Mode training and paid the price. Yes, one must be still when gathering natural chakra, but not when using it. And it's child's play for one sage to give natural chakra to another sage. Using a technique I developed for just such a use, the Sage Art, Amphibian Technique, Shima and I can fuse with you. We gather the natural chakra while you do the fighting in Sage Mode. Pretty useful, huh? Said Fukasaku, obviously pleased with himself for creating such an amazing technique. Meanwhile, Naruto was imagining what a fusion of himself and Fukasaku would look like, his mind conjuring monstrosity after monstrosity to be horrified by. Seeing the look on his face, Fukasaku quickly explained, "It's not an equal fusion. It mostly looks like we're just sitting on your shoulders." Naruto let out the breath he had been holding in relief.
Fukasaku quickly jumped on his shoulder and began the technique. It didn't last long as the small toad was violently ejected from his perch. Fukasaku picked himself up and began thinking as to why his wonderful technique had failed so catastrophically. He came up with nothing and decided to try again, brushing off Naruto's concern for his well-being. Upon attempting the amphibian technique again, the jutsu seemed to work as intended for an instant.
I refuse to share this cage with some pathetic little frog. Out. And the instant was gone, as Fukasaku was launched across the clearing once again. This time, however, he had a much clearer idea of what had gone wrong. "Pa, are you okay?" asked Naruto in concern. Yes, I am fine. Tell me, Naruto, what do you know about the 9 tails? Said Fukasaku, brushing himself off. Isn't that the story you used to tell me when I was a baby about the last toad summoner? Asked Naruto, wondering why Fukasaku was bringing up a fairy tale from before Naruto could remember. I'm afraid it's much more than a fairy tale. Minato died fighting the beast, but you can't kill a tailed beast. He was forced to seal it, but that kind of power can't be sealed into just anything. It had to have an active chakra system, and to top it off, he had to seal it into someone whose chakra system hadn't fully developed so that they could assimilate both the 9 tails and the seal. He sealed the 9 tails into you, said Fukasaku. It's the 9 tails that are rejecting the amphibian technique. I'm afraid that you won't be able to use Sage Mode. I realize this must be a lot to take in, but the toads and I think nothing less of you. This is. Stop, interrupted Naruto, his hair shadowing his eyes. This fox is nothing, shouted Naruto, his eyes full of determination. I won't let this stupid fox dictate what I can and can't do. If I can't fuse with you to use Sage Mode, then I'll just learn to use Sage Mode while moving. What? That's impossible. Gathering natural chakra, whose entire purpose is to be gathered while still, while moving, is impossible. It can't be done, said Fukasaku in disbelief. Before you, Sage Mode was next to useless. You invented the amphibian technique. I'll invent something to gather natural chakra while moving, said Naruto determinedly. Fukasaku's eyes widened before he smiled a devious smirk. All right. If anyone can do it, it's you. But I don't want you trying this without me nearby to knock the natural chakra out of you. Let's do this, yelled Naruto. Are you sure about this, Naruto? You just recently learned to use Sage Mode efficiently, said Shima worriedly. Ma, please. I may have just finished, but I'm better at Sage Mode than either of you. I can't learn any more here. I want to see the world and find others like me, said Naruto. 6 years had passed since he had first learned to absorb natural chakra and enter Sage Mode. The 12-year-old still had his bright yellow hair, but now his eyes were a golden yellow with bar-like pupils and natural chakra showing itself as orange markings around his eyes. The boy's right, Ma. He's surpassed both of us at the technique, but he's still too inexperienced to be a true sage. Real-world experience is the only way to fix that, Fukasaku agreed. Well, I suppose as long as he summons us whenever he gets in over his head, consented Shima. Take this before you go through. It's reserved for sages of Mount Myabukojan. Pa doesn't agree that you've reached that mark, but I do. Besides, it might get cold wherever you are going. Naruto took the red cloak with black flames on the bottom reverently and put it on. Shima hadn't lied. The cloak was exceptionally cozy and warm. Naruto quickly said his goodbyes and left Mount Myabukojan before his tears could catch up to him. Naruto swore then that he would not return to Mount Myabukojan until he had become a true sage, if only he knew what that would entail. Naruto felt that Shima and Fukasaku had raised him well, and they had. Not only had they taught him right from wrong, but they had also taught him more practical things, like numbers and language, manners and etiquette. Naruto had very strict criteria for anything he decided to do. First and foremost, the action in question needed to pose no potential threat to his precious people, currently limited to the toads of Mount Myabukojan. Secondly, it had to not reveal his status as a Jinchuriki. According to Fukasaku and Shima, Jinchuriki were often mistreated and targeted for the beasts they contained. Unfortunately, having only these criteria to judge potential actions gave him a lot of options, not all of them good. Which is how he found himself working for a terrorist organization as a ninja for hire. It wasn't all bad. Tesogare, the organization employing him, had goals which might have been construed as noble, and the pay was good. The idea of liberating the land of woods wasn't something Naruto had a vested interest in, but it wasn't anything too nefarious. Mostly it consisted of Naruto protecting the real rebels from skilled ninjas called roots, While Tasogare destroyed root bases with massive amounts of explosive notes, Naruto had to admit that the root Ambu was skilled, but he wasn't a sage for nothing. He didn't summon the toads during his skirmishes with root forces to keep from being mistaken for Jiri of the Sannin, the only other toad summoner. Naruto would keep his anonymity a bit longer. Tasogare had contacted him after one of his less appealing missions. He had built up as much of a reputation as someone who doesn't want to be noticed can. He had yet to be listed in any bingo books, but his reputation ensured that he never wanted for Ryu. He had yet to encounter another Jinchuriki like himself, but if Fukasaku was telling the truth, hidden villagers were rather secretive about their Jinchuriki. Naruto was broken out of his memories by the call of one of the samurai that Tasogare was composed of. "Hey, Naruto, Zaji wanted to see you when you get the chance," said one of the approaching rebels. "Thanks, Ao, I'll go see what he wanted," replied Naruto, looking up from his meal. He stood up and began walking away to find the leader of Tasogare. He turned his head back around to face his meal when he was several feet away. Suddenly his tongue shot out of his mouth like a bullet from a gun and stuck to the last bit of bacon he had been eating. His tongue then shot back into his mouth just as quickly as it had come out, taking the piece of bacon with it. Petra jumped back in shock as the slimy appendage flashed past her face. Naruto jogged off to find Zaji. He found the commander of Tasogare where one might expect, at the map table in the war tent. "Petra said you wanted to see me. Is it a new job?" asked Naruto, cutting straight to the chase. He liked the whole saving a country thing, but he was in this for the pay at the end of the day. "Yes, one last job. We are this close," Zaji said, holding up two fingers not even an inch apart to signify just how close they were, to ejecting Danzo's accursed root Ambu from the land of woods. "Thanks in no small part to you, but their last base is heavily defended, too heavily defended for any of my men, and probably even you. That's why I've hired some outside help for this one. She came highly recommended as a demolitions expert by a good friend. She should be joining us shortly." Naruto spun around as he sensed something strange. Because Naruto was constantly drawing natural chakra from the environment, he could sense perfectly the location of anything he was taking the chakra of within the considerable range Sage Mode had. The chakra he had sensed now was unlike anything he had ever felt. It, but was shaped vaguely like a bird, a very large bird. That said, the chakra was incredibly unstable. Naruto theorized that the new arrival was riding on top of the bird, which was probably a summon, or some similar creature. The unstable chakra could very well be how this demolitions expert, demolished. Zaji followed Naruto's gaze to see an empty sky. Several minutes passed before a large hawk appeared and continued to grow as it approached them, startlingly white against the blue sky. As the bird drew closer, Naruto noticed the person riding atop the bird, a girl not much older than himself with hair almost as bright a shade of yellow as his. Her hair went halfway down her back and had one large bang covering the left side of her face. She wore a mesh undershirt and a green battle kimono with white trim. As she drew within earshot, the demolitions expert announced her presence. "I'm here for the job with the Tasogare, yeah. Are you Zaji?" she said. "Indeed I am. Are you the Deidara that my friend recommended?" responded Zaji. "Of course, I am, yeah. So you decided to buy some of my art to cause some havoc? Smart move, yeah," the newly introduced Deidara said. "Art?" asked Naruto, deciding to make his presence known. "That's what my ninjutsu is, a noble and refined art," said Deidara, holding up a small clay spider in her hand, which oddly enough had a mouth embedded in it, teeth, tongue, and all. "Look, such refined lines, and a form that pursues two-dimensional deform. This is art, but that's not all there is to my art. My creations flow, yeah, like this. It's simply molded clay. But my art explodes, and when it explodes it becomes sublime, and for the first time, the essence of my creation appears, yeah. That instant of sublimation is when true art can exist. True art is an explosion, yeah." "Wow," said Naruto, unsure of what to say after Deidara's long-winded speech on art, which explodes. Having never really covered art in Fukasaku's lectures, Naruto's first exposure to art was small clay figures that exploded, which was not exactly the socially accepted standard of the practice. As much as I love explaining art to the uneducated, we should probably have this Shamuk leave so you can tell me what needs artistic renovation, said Deidara, gesturing to Naruto as the uneducated in the room. Naruto narrowed his golden eyes in annoyance but otherwise remained silent, content with letting Zaji explain the situation. Naruto here will be working with you. Your job will to be destroy the physical structure of this base, the leader of Tasogare said, pointing to the last root base on the map table. Naruto here will be in charge of the personnel in the base. Can you two handle it? I don't know about this guy, so don't come crying to me if he ends up as an artistic smear on the ground, said Deidara offhandedly.
Naruto glared over at her. If you can so much as scratch me with your art, I'll give you my entire paycheck for this job. The two blondes slammed their foreheads together, glaring lighting over the short distance.
I'll take that as a yes, said Zaji good-naturedly. I'll leave you to it. Remember though, if the job isn't finished, you won't get paid. Yeah, no problem, said Naruto before he hopped into the trees, Deidara close behind on a clay bird. Torane would be frustrated if Lord Danzo's harsh training hadn't removed all emotion from him. He had been sent to this backwoods country to quell a rebellion that only should have taken 20 root ambu to stop. This Tasogare didn't even have a single ninja among them. Torane and Fu had personally made sure that the Land of Woods ninja clans were wiped out. No, Lord Danzo's elite root ninjas were fighting samurai, and losing. While they didn't have a single ninja, Ryo was no object to the surprisingly well-funded rebellion. Torane couldn't even be angry at the missing ninja that the Land of Woods had hired, both because he literally couldn't and because even the missing ninja had to earn money. This of course did not translate to mercy when in combat. The mission comes first after all. And it was because of those same missing ninjas that Torane had been assigned to this pathetic little assignment in the middle of nowhere when he would be of more use serving Lord Danzo back in the Hidden Leaf. Torane had tried to muster the forces and just end this charade already so he could return to Lord Danzo's side, but Tasogare had apparently hired some rather competent ninja. Torane was just thinking over how he would lure them out when the ceiling shook. Realizing that this either meant an enemy attack or an earthquake, Torane was forced to make a quick decision. If it was an enemy attack, they would want to stick to the base, but remaining underground during an earthquake would kill them all as surely as an army of the enemy ninja. Deciding that the rebels couldn't have the kind of firepower required to make him feel the shock several dozen feet below the earth, Torane quickly ordered his fellow root members out of the subterranean base. As Torane arrived at the entrance to the commandeered base, he noticed that the others had yet to exit the doors. What seems to be the issue? Asked Torane in his typical monotone. Sir, one of the sensors detected several large chakra sources outside. We determined that they are the source of the tremors. Awaiting further orders, informed one of the more experienced root members on the squad in a tone of voice indistinguishable from Torrance. Just as Torane was about to order the squads back to defensive positions to repel the enemies, the doors crashed inwards and crushed several less alert root members. Torane was down to only himself and 7 other roots. Although, Torane couldn't blame the 2 dead root members for being crushed by the large metal doors. The doors had been reinforced by a dual iron bar seal. Anyone capable of destroying them, even with repeated barrages, was not forced to trifle with. Before the dust could clear, what appeared to be a long tongue shot out of the cloud of debris and hit one of his remaining roots in the chest. The tongue immediately retreated into the dust cloud. Make that 6 root ambu left, thought Torane as despondently as someone without emotions can. The almost sad feeling changed to not quite surprise when the root member dragged into the dust came flying out a moment later at phenomenal speeds, leaving a massive crater in the wall he was embedded in. Torane reassured himself with the thought that no matter how strong the individual was, one touch would be enough to end him. As Torane shed his gloves and shirt, his skin took on a vibrant shade of purple, not exactly as stealthy as one would like for a profession based on sneaking around. Of course, that didn't matter since if Torane had taken off his shirt and gloves, he wasn't trying to be stealthy. The time had come to die for the mission if needed. Wow, only 10 enemies. When Zaji said that this base was well defended, I thought he was serious, said their mystery attacker as he stepped out of the settling dust cloud. I don't even need Didara's help on this. Torane took in the attacker. His blonde hair stood out in stark contrast to the Root Ambu's standard creme-colored cloaks and blank white masks. His red cloak with black flames licking at the bottom certainly would have impressed on most people how cool this individual was, but none of the Root Ambu was impressed. But the strangest thing about him was his eyes. They were a dull gold, with bar-like pupils, and his eyes were surrounded by what appeared to be orange eyeshadow. Perhaps some kind of bloodline. Regardless, he would be colored purple by the end of this. That was when his accomplice arrived. Another blonde with equally bright hair. Her eyes were blue, or at least the one Torane could see were. The large owl she was on, however, was white. What nearly irritated him was the fact that Tasogare had sent 2 children, no older than 13, to face down an experienced Root Ambu. Based on the insults flying between the two of them, they weren't even a cohesive team. He took the time given to him by the 2 allies arguing to send a nonverbal plan to his teammates with the Root Ambu hand sign code. This was exactly why he didn't understand how emotions could ever be an asset on the battlefield.
By arguing, they had given their enemies enough time to plot against them. Root Ambu never disobeyed an order, even when it involved attacking an unknown opponent to discern their strength. Which is what one of them did, swinging his tanto at the first blonde's exposed back while another ran at the female. The 2 of them stopped bickering to throw up their right hands. That's when Toru knew Root would be walking away from this fight in pain, if at all.
The Root Ambu behind the female exploded. One of the remaining Root members signaled his observations from his better viewpoint. He had seen a small white blur jump from the girl's hand. That had most likely been some sort of explosive that had killed Root member number 4. In contrast, no one had an explanation for what had killed Root member number 5. He had been several feet away from the red-clad blonde's fist but had gone flying back as if Tsunade herself had punched him in the face. Torane decided to take the male blonde and signaled the other 4 Root Ambu to take out the female. Torane ran at his opponent as the other Root members moved at the same time. The white owl that the female was standing on flapped its wings and took to the sky, exiting the base as the Root members followed. The first blonde made the mistake of looking at his comrade leaving, taking his eyes off Torane in the process. The last mistake he'll ever make, thought Torane as he went to punch his opponent across the exposed skin of the face. Instead of the fist making contact, the blonde reached up and caught the punch in a palm that didn't give an inch. What startled Torane was the fact that his opponent hadn't looked in his direction at all. I'm kind of insulted that I was only deemed worthy of one opponent, said the red-clad child. I mean, it's not like I haven't what. Torane grinned as he saw that his opponent wasn't wearing gloves. Even among the Aburame, Torane had been unique. He commanded a swarm of microscopic insects that inhabited his body. Through physical contact, he could infect his opponents with these insects, which were poisonous to everyone but himself. The insects would feed off the chakra of their opponents like regular parasitic insects, but the poison killed them far faster than chakra exhaustion. The poison would take longer to spread if it started in the hand, and the limb could be amputated to remove the poison, but Torane had more or less won. Still, one didn't become one of Lord Danzo's most trusted by taking risks and assuming things. Torane swept out his tanto for a quick slice to the neck for the kill. His tanto made clean contact but somehow failed to penetrate the skin. Not only that, the tanto shattered as if it were made of glass. Torane jumped back as his opponent went to punch him in the stomach. Rather than follow through, the blonde was staring at his left hand in what Torone imagined horror would look like as it slowly turned purple. He had won. Then the strangest thing began to happen. The purple skin began to turn stone gray from the original point of contact and quickly spread, overtaking the microscopic insects. The poison had only spread halfway up the forearm before it stopped entirely. The blonde angrily wrung his gray hand with his right hand, breaking a thin layer of actual stone that had formed over his left hand and forearm. "Don't you know, natural chakra is dangerous," said the blonde as he rushed through seals faster than anyone his age had any right to. He raised the final ram sign to his mouth and spewed forth a mass of yellow liquid. Torone jumped over the stream of the most peculiar water style he had ever seen when he smelled it. This stream wasn't yellow water, but oil. The blonde seemed to know this as well, as he tossed an explosive note into the stream. It was quickly absorbed into the stream, and the moment the child stopped spitting the oil, it exploded. Luckily, Torone had managed to use some ninja wire from his front pouches to get away from the explosion, but the explosion was enormous and engulfed the room. The inferno caught up to Torone quickly. He fell to the ground wreathed in flames before performing the replacement technique to switch with the log. Any normal ninja would try all the harder to overcome this foe, but ninjas trained as Root Ambu weren't governed by their emotions. Torone knew when to cut his losses and inform Lord Danzo of his discoveries. Torone performed the body flicker technique to put as much distance between himself and the much stronger rogue ninja that had attacked the base and, presumably, killed the other 9 root members. He had put enough distance between himself and the base that he felt safe tree jumping instead of using the body flicker. He was glad. The body flicker was known to aggravate injuries received, and he had suffered painful burns across his body. As he jumped from tree to tree, he noticed a large, white spider on one of the tree limbs he jumped past. Almost as if it responded to him noticing it, the spider jumped from its perch and latched onto his face. Right before the spider exploded, Torone heard the last words he would hear. "With this, become art, Katsu." Deidara supposed her temporary partner wasn't completely useless. Sure, he knocked down the doors to the enemy base, thereby alerting everyone in said base to their presence, but he had also led her to the last of the root guys. Plus, if the burns all over the last guy's body were anything to go by, Naruto wasn't as hopeless as she had initially thought when it came to art. Right now they were flying back to the Tasogure HQ to receive their rewards on her replacement mount, a large, clay hawk. Her owl had served her well, but it had finally achieved its artful purpose when it exploded in the faces of her enemies. As they drew closer, Naruto's eye snapped open in alarm. Deidara had noticed that at the very least, he was a reliable sensor with a massive range, so when he told him to hurry to the Tasogure base, she did. Upon arriving at the base, the 2 young blondes found the base in ruins, tents aflame and corpses littering the ground. While the 2 didn't care too much for the rebels, their payment was another matter entirely. They landed to see if anything was left for them to take as collateral from their late employer. Standing in the middle of what used to be the main gathering place was one person. He stood tall and regal as if the grime of the battlefield wouldn't dare touch him. His orange hair blew slightly in the wind, but the piercings across his face distracted him from even the strange hair color. The other striking thing about him was the cloak he wore. It went from a high collar down to his ankles, colored black accented by blood-red clouds on the outside while the inside was the same color as the clouds. Just his very presence made the 2 blondes believe they couldn't take him on, even together. Naruto was the first to overcome the presence of the man who had rendered this carnage upon the Tasogure camp without obtaining as much as a scratch. "Who are you?" he managed to stammer out past the lump in his throat. The orange-haired man looked the 2 blondes in the eyes, and they saw for the first time the purple ripples that his eyes seemed to be made of. "I am God. I am the one who will bring peace to this pathetic world. I am Pain," introduced the man, apparently known as Pain. While his claim to be God was ridiculous, Something about the way he carried himself and the power he exuded made Naruto believe him. I am the leader of a group known as Akatsuki, comprised of a select group of powerful individuals. We cooperate for our purposes, but my ultimate goal is to bring peace to this world. I am offering the two of you a place within the organization, continued Pain in a tone that brokered no argument. Naruto was terrified, but he had to know. How do you plan to bring about peace? I'm all for it, but I won't follow a madman. Peace shall be achieved through the Jinchuriki, or more specifically, the tailed beasts. Akatsuki shall control them to create an era of peace, said Pain with absolute conviction. Will you stand alongside us? Naruto looked at Deidara and the two nodded to each other in unison. Yes, they said simultaneously. They would follow this god, this Pain. Naruto and Deidara worked together as a two-ninja team in the coming years. They had donned the Akatsuki cloak and placed the ring on their fingers. They had met the other members of Akatsuki, and while each was powerful in their own right, none commanded the area around them as much as Akatsuki's leader, Pain. But their adventures in Akatsuki are a tale for another time. 3 years after their induction into the ranks of legends, another young ninja begins his journey to become a legend. Iruka Umino was one of the few ninjas that were entirely content with where he was in life. He had achieved the rank of Chunin and become a teacher of the next generation of ninjas in the Hidden Leaf Village. While he was originally unsure about being entrusted with such an important duty, some support from his best friend Mizuki had reassured him concerning his abilities. After that small hurdle, the two friends were ready to teach the young genin to be. If only they would stay awake in class. Having had enough, Iruka threw an eraser at one of the repeat offenders. The blue-haired academy student groggily came to his senses as the eraser connected. Sora, perhaps you could tell us what type of jutsu the legendary Sannin all used? Asked Iruka, hoping to teach the kid a lesson about paying attention. How the hell should I know? Aren't you the teacher? If you are asking a student for help, maybe someone needs to tell the Hokage about the low quality of the teachers here, responded Sora sarcastically. Iruka sighed. Sora was always rude, even to people he liked. Not that he had many that liked him, having the 9 tails sealed inside him. While the beast had strangely disappeared after its attack 16 years ago, it resurfaced inside Sora 7 years later. It had taken all 12 of the Guardian Ninjas to defeat the beast. When the dust cleared, only 4 people were left alive, one of them being a 2-year-old Sora. Those in the class didn't know why Sora's right hand was bandaged, but those who were there years ago knew of the beast-like arm. Regardless, Iruka was a teacher first, so Sora would be a student first, not a beast. You would know because it's what the class has been covering for the last 10 minutes. Maybe if you were awake, you would know that. Sakura, what jutsu are all of the Sannin known for? Interrupted Mizuki, who had far less sympathy for Sora. That would be the summoning technique, began the pink-haired girl. Jiri summons toads, Orochimaru summons snakes, and Lady Tsunade summons slugs. It's said that. Nerd, interrupted Sora in a very loud and obnoxious manner. Sora, detention, bellowed Iruka, the force from his voice seemingly pushing Sora's hair back like gale force winds. Sora's head was back on the desk snoring away within the hour. Sora had tried to escape out the window immediately after class had been dismissed, but Iruka had noticed and grabbed the wayward student for his punishment. Sora was in the process of carrying logs into the exam room for the replacement technique portion of the exams tomorrow. You know, Sora, your grades as they are won't be able to cushion a failing grade on any portion of the exam tomorrow. Even Shikamaru's grades are higher than yours, said Iruka matter-of-factly. So what, you think I can't cut, huh bub? Retaliated Sora. What was that? Said Iruka menacingly, not taking kindly to a student calling him names. Bud. I said bud, like pal, friend, amigo, comrade, mate, chum, exclaimed Sora hurriedly to try and avoid any more punishment. Iruka sighed at his student's attempt to save himself from the self-dug hole. It's not that you can't cut. You have the potential to be one of the best ninjas of your generation. But you won't be a ninja of your generation at all if you don't try your best tomorrow. It's not a threat, just a warning from teacher to student, explained Iruka. You don't have to pretend to care. I'm used to it, said Sora angrily. I'm not pretending, Sora, began Iruka. I do, looks like I'm done with the posts. See ya tomorrow, said Sora as he jumped out of the window to escape the caring teacher. Sora knew what happened when he got close to people. They got hurt or hurt him. Sora had decided long ago to go without friends, no matter how lonely he got. Sora's next human contact came hours later as he was napping in one of the trees near the memorial stone. The man appeared to be in his early 30s and carried a large staff on his back. He had the sides of his head shaven, leaving brown hair on only the top of his head. His Jonan flak jacket was worn with pride, though even more prominently displayed was the waistcloth adorned with the kanji for fire. Sora recognized him as Kitane, one of the 3 surviving members of the 12 Guardian Ninja. He waited for Sora to acknowledge his presence before speaking. Didn't your teacher recommend studying? I'm not sure sleeping in trees will be on the test tomorrow, said the lightning user. Doesn't matter. Everyone hates me for whatever reason. I doubt they'd let me be a ninja, even if I was the best in the class, said Sora bitterly. I knew your father, began Kitane, putting up his hand to stop the question on Sora's tongue. His name was Kazuma, and he was one of my comrades. Wait, does that mean my dad was one of the 12 Guardian Ninjas? Exclaimed Sora, stunned by this new information. Why did no one ever tell me? Only Azuma, Chiriku, and I know. Azuma served the feudal lord until recently. He probably forgot you were still around. You can't blame Chiriku either. He lives at the fire temple up in the mountains doing monk stuff.
You were 2 when he died. I thought you were old enough to remember, and for that, I apologize. Only recently did I hear that you had no idea, said Kitane, his voice drenched in sorrow for leaving a friend's son without the knowledge of his father. Sora was still speechless when Kitane spoke up again. Though if I knew Kazuma, he wouldn't want his only son to fail the academy exams. If you manage to pass the test tomorrow, I managed to get an old friend to agree to take you as his student.
Did he know my father? Asked Sora, desperate for any more information about the father he never knew. Azuma and Kazuma were as good of friends as they come. I was never too close to Kazuma, shrugged Kitane. But Azuma probably knows what his favorite flavor of ramen was. If anyone could tell you more, it would be Azuma. Wow, said Sora, thoroughly awed. I'm gonna pass that test tomorrow. Believe it, exclaimed Sora excitedly. Hold up, said Kitane, holding up his hands to emphasize his point. Azuma did say you had to pass one test to prove that you're more than just Kazuma's son. Azuma wants to see if you are Kazuma's heir. What does that mean? Asked Sora, torn between being furious that there was a catch and confused as to what Kitane meant. As I said earlier, Azuma hasn't heard of you since he's been in the capital this whole time. He trusts me, but he wants to make sure. There's a technique known only by your father and Azuma. He wants to see if you can pull it off. It isn't a complicated technique, but Azuma has the only remaining scroll detailing how to use it. But we both want you to succeed, so I'll tell you where he keeps it. Sora was too ecstatic to have heard about his father and have the hope of more to notice anything suspicious. Sora was having a great day ever since Kitane had talked to him. Asuma's apartment had been a piece of cake to break into. The scroll had been somewhat hard to find, but Kitane's instructions hadn't led him wrong, and he had headed out of the village to one of the training grounds in the woods. He had forgotten the specific training ground in the excitement of learning a new jutsu on top of finding out about his father. Sora figured he'd see if this Azuma was all that. If he couldn't find Sora practicing a destructive jutsu in the woods, Sora would get all the info about Kazuma he could and train under someone more competent. But deep down, Sora was just too happy to care about anything beyond learning about his father. Sora cracked open the scroll and began to read about the flying swallow. After several hours of practice, Sora was feeling like Kitane had lied to him. This jutsu wasn't easy at all. Channeling chakra was difficult enough, but wind chakra was proving to be impossible. He had been at it for hours, and the claw marks from his weapon were strewn around the clearing he was training in. Sora decided to take a short break to recover his chakra. He didn't pay attention in class all the time, ever, but Iruka made sure a blind, deaf, and dumb worm learned the dangers of chakra exhaustion. Sora didn't exactly know what chakra exhaustion felt like, but he was kinda tired and had been using a lot of chakras, so he assumed that it counted. After a short time, Sora did what he did best, sleep. You know, I wasn't sure what to think when Kazuma-san decided to try and steal from a Jonin's place of residence in broad daylight. Sora awoke to a deep voice. If the military police were still around, you'd be sleeping in a jail cell, not a forest. Sora sat up and opened his eyes to take in the new arrival. He wore a Jonin's flak jacket and a leaf forehead protector, identifying him as a ninja. A cigarette hung from his mouth, and his brown hair stretched down from the top of his head to the bottom of his chin in large sideburns and a small goatee. All of this was lost on Sora once he saw the waistcloth with the kanji for fur emblazoned on it, identifying the man as one of the 12 guardian ninjas. Other than Kitane, the only living members were Azuma and Chiriku, and since Chiriku was living in some monastery somewhere, this could only be Azuma. Sora was slightly afraid of being punished by the man he had stolen from, but Azuma seemed more amused than angry. I decided to follow the little squirt who thought he could steal from me, set on stopping a potential spy. But I must say, even if you are Kazuma's kid, learning the flying swallow to this degree in such a short time is impressive. Before Sora could respond, 3 poles struck the ground in a triangle around him. Lightning sprung from the staff, forming an electric blue wall around Sora.
Asuma, glad you showed up. Now we can finish this, said Kitane menacingly as he stepped out from under the trees.
Finish what? What are you on about? Asked Azuma, confused as to what his old friend was talking about. We can avenge Kazuma. We can kill the 9 tails, said Kitane, a wild look in his eyes. What are you talking about? Asked Sora, even more confused by these proceedings than Azuma. Where does the 9 tails come into any of this? Don't tell me you couldn't figure it out. Your right arm, the hate-filled looks, the mysterious disappearance of the 9 tails? No one knows where the 9 tails went right after the attack all those years ago, but it resurfaced to attack the 12 Guardian Ninja. Putting 2 and 2 together yet, Sora, said Kitane as Sora's eyes widened with the realization of what Kitane was implying. Let me spell it out for you. You aren't Kazuma's son Sora, you just took that form after we defeated you. You are the 9 tails that killed our comrades all those years ago, including Sora's father Kazuma, Naoma, Sito, too, and I defeated you using limelight long enough for the 3rd Hokage to seal you back up, but that arm is proof that you'll just break that seal soon enough. I set you on learning the flying swallow to exhaust you so Azuma and I could finish you off once and for all. What are you talking about, Kitane? My dad might not be the seal master the 4th was, but he knows what he's doing. This is Sora, and if you kill him, the 9 tails he's been holding back all these years like a hero will be released. I took so much sacrifice to stop the beast before, and you'd see that wasted for some misaimed revenge? Azuma spoke in disbelief before drawing 2 trench knives out of his kunai pouch. I'm sorry, Kitane, but I won't let the others have died in vain. Very well then, Azuma. If you aren't with me, then you're against me. Sorry, but you'll have to die alongside the 9 tails, shouted Kitane as he drew another staff from his back, the tip splitting into 3 prongs, lightning arching between them. Meanwhile, Sora was shocked by the deluge of information he was receiving. Kitane hadn't meant a word he said earlier. Kitane hadn't wanted to watch over him, or help him become a ninja. He had just wanted to exhaust Sora for an easy kill, and though Sora was loath to admit it, it had worked. He was dead tired. Asuma's trench knives clashed repeatedly with Kitane's staff, Though the wind chakra coating them gave Azuma the technical advantage, Kitane's staff kept even the elongated knives at a safe distance. And while the wind chakra running their length dispersed the lightning, some still made it down the knives to give Azuma a small jolt. It was nothing in small doses, but the small shocks started to add up. Just give it up, Azuma. Just let me kill the nine tails. There's no need for us to fight, shouted Kitane over the crackling of the lightning and the howling winds. Not a chance, Azuma shot back, jumping back to try and tip the scales. Asuma's hands flew through the seals and Kitane did likewise. They completed their two different techniques at the same time. Fire style, ash pile burning. Lightning style, raging bolt. A large sphere of lightning formed over Kitane's head, crackling with power before hurtling down at Azuma. Azuma spits a large black cloud of smoke at Kitane, and the smoke also covered his escape. I always knew you were a coward, but this is a new low for you, Azuma. Kitane whirled around in the smoke, searching for Azuma. Suddenly, Azuma spoke up, his voice coming from seemingly every direction. Shame you were always too focused on your berserker charges to notice the end of this jutsu. With that said, an audible click was heard as Azuma hit the flint he had embedded in his tooth ever since Chiriku had chipped it. The resulting spark was enough to expose the smoke to what it was, highly flammable gunpowder. The resulting explosion destroyed the area, and for once Sora was glad for the lightning walls surrounding him. Azuma spoke again as the smoke cleared. Looks like you let your guard down at the end. Azuma walked over to Sora's prison and sliced one of the pillars of the lightning field clean in half, ending the technique. Who let his guard down at the end? Lightning style, lightning eruption. What? Exclaimed Azuma as the ground beneath him lit up an electric yellow. Kitane emerged from the remaining smoke, lightly burnt with his staff in shambles, but otherwise unharmed. The electricity from Kitane's technique shot up from the ground, electrocuting Azuma and bringing him to his knees. As it was, he had only remained conscious through copious amounts of wind chakra being pumped through his body. Kitane laughed at his former comrade's sorry state. As if I didn't know what your techniques do. We were comrades for years. Now move aside so I can end the nine tails. No, Kazuma wouldn't want this, Kitane. Sora isn't the nine tails. I can't profess to know him intimately, but Sora is Sora, no one else. And Sora is our friend's son. I'll die before I let you kill him. Azuma was shouting by the end and had tightened his grip on his trench knives. Well, then I'll just kill you first. Lightning style, thunderclap. Lightning began to cover Kitane's hands as he finished the hand seals for his technique. He rushed forward, bringing his arms back to crush Asuma's head like a grape. Sora's eyes widened as he lunged forward. Kitane grinned internally. Sora's desperate slash with his triple-bladed claws would fall a good foot short of Kitane. Kitane adjusted his attack to hit Sora instead of Azuma. The claws passed by harmlessly, and Kitane went in for the kill. Or he would have if a sharp pain hadn't spread across his chest. That was when Kitane noticed the red chakra coating the blades of Sora's claws, extending a good foot and a half past the end of the claws. Looking down, Kitane noticed the three parallel slashes across his chest. He had only a second to marvel at the fact that Sora had managed to learn the flying swallow technique in only a few hours before the more experienced user of the flying swallow struck him square in the chest. Flying swallow, straight line, shouted Azuma as his fist slid around Kitane's chest. Then the ground on the other side of Kitane buckled in the shape of a crescent. Kitane's body fell to the ground in two pieces, cut perfectly in half by the blade of wind chakra. Sora looked both awed by the destruction caused by the flying swallow and glad that the liar who had manipulated him was dead. Sora was brought out of his revelry by Asuma's voice. Come on, Sora. As much as I'd love to collapse here and rest, we'd best report this to the Hokage. Sora could only swallow and nod as Azuma started to walk away. Azuma looked over his shoulder at the young blue-haired boy. And, good work back there. The flying swallow isn't easy to learn, so, good job. Despite all that he had been through, Sora found a grin creeping up on his face. Miles away, 10 shadowy figures gathered atop the fingertips of a massive statue, only their eyes visible through the technique that allowed them all to gather here. The figure atop the right thumb spoke with clear authority. Since we are gathered here, I can only assume that Zetsu and Sasori have found the targets. Am I correct? The figure asked, looking over at the left hand with ringed eyes. Indeed, we just located the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. He certainly knows how to hide, but we finally got him to use the Nine-Tails Chakra. Yeah, thanks for letting us use that Kitane guy, answered the figure on the little finger of the right hand with two distinct voices and a rather unique silhouette. The hunched-over figure on the left thumb of the statue spoke up next in a deep, raspy voice. Well, you're not welcome. That one was a useful spy, not that he knew. But desperate times call for desperate measures. The Nine-Tails has certainly kept us waiting, and I hate waiting. Now that we have identified the targets, it will be up to you to gather them. Wait until the beast before yours has been captured to move. But once that requirement is met, take as much time as you will. It will make little difference. But do not strike in a way to draw attention. Akatsuki must remain in the shadows a bit longer if we are to succeed in blinding the world with our light, spoke the figure on the right thumb. I'm just surprised you managed to find him at all. He's successfully evaded the two best spy masters on the continent for over 15 years. Good job, said the figure that stood on the left little finger as his golden eyes hid a mixture of relief and confusion. We are Akatsuki, spoke a female voice from the right middle finger. The only time we do not do good jobs is when we do perfect jobs. Collect the information on your targets. We start with the 7 tails. Dismissed. With those final words from the leader, the shadowy figures faded into nothingness and the demonic statue slipped into the ground, leaving no evidence that anyone had ever been there. And that's the end of What If Naruto Was Raised by Gamabunta to Replaced Minato. Like, share and subscribe. See you next time.